The footage I have now are dimensional trials from before global launched. These tier 30s used to be the highest tiers, but now they are equivalent to the updated tier 10s in Korea and soon global. I will not really explain mechanics seen in the regular version of these dungeons, and will just quickly go through newly added mechanics from the dimensional trials, which will all be active at tiers 5 and above. 3 attacks in dimensional trials do not have a timing indicator. First off, we have Terror. All bosses now begin their first mechanic at 90%, and for Terror, we have the Rat phase. In this phase, we usually have 2 to 3 people go outside controlling the boss, while the others can just stay buried underground. Unlike how I did it in my footage, however, you could have people bait out 1 or 2 bite animations before he starts his lightning AoE. People on the outside will just need to dive before they are touched by the rotating ring and rotate boss aggro until he is stunned. If anyone is eaten or CC'd within his domain, he will trigger a party wipe mechanic. Shortly after, we have the Fog phase. In this phase, you will allocate one person to clear the debuff above their head by clearing 35 puffs of smoke with the burn debuff. The others are tasked with clearing the geyser pits without touching too much smoke outside of the pits, so that the fog clearer may have an easier time. The first time he does this, you will have a lot of leeway because he summons the fog pretty early. In later fog phases, you will want to be a bit more careful with the timing of your burn debuff. I recommend standing in the first or second fire AoE, then linking up with the final flame cross to extend your burn debuff as long as possible. Just be careful for the second time round the fireballs drop, that you save enough stamina to roll dodge when the boss AoEs. The tank should have aggro on all the small lizards that spawn, and the rest of the team will just AoE them down while attacking the boss. Once he hits the geyser phase, the person without the debuff will simply just Mario jump the bubbles to free the rest of the team. The final new mechanic is just jumping the waves that will come from 4 directions one after the other. The first wave will always come from the southeast, so turn your camera that way in preparation for the first jump. After that, you will just need to flip your camera around and jump accordingly. The tank will also take a stun here from the boss, so your healer and cleanser should be ready to help him there. That is basically it for Terror. In Voidwastes, you will need to manage the line debuff stacks more carefully as they stack up much more quickly. It is often best to allocate a ranged and a melee player to a line while also allocating a specific pillar zone to everybody in the party for them to stand in during the fight. Reaching 30 stacks will kill you, and if the boss reaches 30 stacks, then he will trigger a party wipe mechanic. The first phase will be the breath phase. The closest person, which is usually the tank, will receive the orb and will need to aim the boss's breath towards the 3 shining pillars instead of the 2. Everyone else will have an AoE circle around them that will fear anyone else that touches it. During this phase, the boss will also spawn 2 lanes of light towards 2 pillars that stun, similar to that of the tier 1 dungeon, Cursed Wasteland. One of the players closest will need to interact with the pillar so that the party can position opposite to the shining pillars to avoid the breath, while also not fearing each other. You will be susceptible to stun from the light lanes while you are covering the purple lines during phase transition. To avoid this, it is best to move back before the boss phases. The breath phase happens every 55 to 60 seconds above 35%, and an additional 15 seconds between double breath phases under 35%. The first mechanic added to Turka is an AoE pushback where he will bind the 2 furthest players. You will need a person to stand near these 2 players to initiate a laser with whomever the boss targets. They will then need to have the laser run through the remaining person to free them while preparing for a jump to dodge the boss's stomp. The laser bearers will need to be careful not to split too far apart from each other, as this will break the laser. Shortly after, the boss will transition into the sheep phase. Above 50%, the boss will summon 6 white sheep on the edges of the arena. Everyone apart from the laser bearers and tank will need to gather the sheep to the center so that the laser can deal huge amounts of damage to the sheep. In earlier tiers, it is not required for the tank to have the boss double charge the sheep, but as you go higher up, you will need more and more damage to clear all the sheep. Once 6 sheep are killed, the interactable orb is spawned for the buff. Be careful, as in dimensional trials, the orb can be destroyed by the meteors and the boss's magma wave cone. which is why you can see everyone apart from the tank wait until meteors drop before interacting with the orb. Below 50%, the boss will spawn 8 white sheep, but the orb will still spawn after 6 sheep are killed. It is best to interact with the orb before killing any remaining sheep once it spawns. Under 50%, once the boss rolls back around to the AoE push mechanic, he will summon a black sheep which will explode and deal party-wide damage. You can either kill the sheep with the assistance of the laser or just tank it. Party-wide blood diversion can be helpful here from the tank to soak more damage. One last thing is that the boss will periodically use a party-wide AoE. The damage can be vastly reduced by using a frost debuff on him, which usually comes from a staff player, but I believe the frost variation of Mother Nature's Prophet from crossbow would also work if you do not have a staff user. The boss will transition into pillar phase at 90%. The closest two people towards the center will be free, typically one of them being a healer. The second furthest person will have a red axe debuff above their head which deals a dot. This is usually given to the tank. And the furthest person will have the orb which indicates who the boss will be AoEing first. Below 50%, the second closest person who is free will also receive a blue axe debuff which also deals a dot. During the pillar phase, bound players will take constant damage from their pillar, damage increasing depending on their distance from their pillar. The moment party members are lifted, the non-healer will move to the edge to take aggro from the spinning axe. After the boss throws the spinning axe, he will start with a party-wide fury attack, then aim an AoE cone at whoever had the orb above their head. The orb player will need to run away from the person with the red axe debuff towards the other closest pillar. While this is happening, the healer should already be on the tank killing him. Once the boss starts to aim his AoE cone at the tank, the healer will take the red axe debuff, because having the red axe debuff and breaking the chain will cause it to explode, killing the holder. Under 50%, you can decide whether you want the blue axe debuff on the healer or the person kiting the spinning axe. The other person will then be required to take the red axe debuff from the tank. Right after the pillar phase, it will instantly go into the colored shape phase. The 4 closest players would need to remember the position of the shapes and then head towards where the shapes were shown. For this part, I usually say out loud the colors from left to right, green, red, teal in this case. If my color is not one of the ones I called out, I will then know that my spot is directly behind me. The 2 furthest players will need to kite the spinning axe and be prepared to roll dodge an incoming charge from the boss. After that, he will charge 2 more times like his normal charge. The final change is simply a roll dodge when he starts AoE spinning. In this dimensional trial, above tier 5, you will need to keep the light tanks well managed to prevent the party wipe mechanic, which happens when you have 0 or 5 lit up tanks. At 90%, I believe the boss will go into his spinning red AoE phase. The tank will need to stalwart bastion here to reduce the damage. If it is still too much damage reduction from skills like Da Vinci and Blood Devotion can help. Other helpful sources can be damage reduction from 40 strength, or simply just more skill damage resist. The boss will also drop AoE puddles on the ground during this phase, just don't stand in it for too long. After this, he will pull and stun one person to one side of the arena. You can free this person by blocking 3 fury attacks near said player. As you go higher up in tier, you may need a greatsword DPS user to help out the tank with blood devotion to soak damage from the boss's barrage skill. Next is the zombie phase. The boss will only spawn 3 zombies if he is above 65% before he teleports to the center when phase transitioning. Under 65% he will spawn 5 zombies instead. In the first part, you can just have any free players interact with the light tanks as long as they have the closed eye symbol above their head from blocking fury attacks. Opening a light tank will open the eye symbol above your head and reduce your HP. If you have a zombie following you, it will reveal a number above the zombie's head, which will indicate the proper positioning needed for the zombie to pass this phase. The lower the number, the closer you have to be to the boss, with 1 being the closest and 3 being the furthest. During zombie phases with 5 zombies, 5 will be the furthest, while 3 will be the third closest. After summoning the zombies, the boss will do a quick fire attack into a fury attack. The boss will then go into a zombie positioning check by zapping the zombies with lightning from the sky. If the zombie is in the correct order, the zombie will hug whoever it is following, while in incorrect positioning will result in a red lightning on the zombie. The boss will do a total of 3 zombie positioning checks between every 2 attacks. Failing the third check will have your zombie hug you, but you'll also get executed by the boss. Having an open-eyed symbol while getting hugged by a zombie will prevent you from having it for the next zombie phase, so you want the other 3 players to open the light tanks in the next one. One more thing about the zombie phase, the boss will also have blood orbs float towards him from lit up light tanks, which increases his damage. You will need to intercept these blood orbs to prevent him from getting too strong. Taking 2 blood orbs in a single zombie phase will kill you. The last important mechanic for this dimensional trial is the pizza cone mechanic. At the lower tiers, you may tank 2 or 3, but as you progress into higher tiers, it gets stronger. After the zombie phase, the boss will do his attacking rotations, and then at some point, an arrow rain aiming the closest and 2 furthest players. Once that is done, my group likes to do the pizza mechanic by stacking up on each other opposite to the tank. Once the gem indicator flashes a 3rd time, locking the pizza cone position, you can move out of the way for the 4th flash, which will be the AoE. If everyone is able to survive a single pizza cone, doing this mechanic split up may be better. A bug that was around when I was progressing through this dimensional trial is blocking right when you are getting hugged by the number 1 zombie will allow you to take damage from the boss's auto attack. Another one is the boss going into the pizza cone mechanic without using his arrow rain AoEs at all. The last one, which I don't have footage of, is having a dead player respawned and standing near the boss room entrance can disrupt the zombie positioning. Final word after I just finished editing. Global just launched with the original 30 tiers, so whenever I say tier 5 in the video, I mean tiers 13 to 15. New mechanics are added at tier 5, 9 and 13. The global servers finally have some challenging PvE content since they nerfed the original tier 2 dungeons to the ground. I hope you all have a blast and enjoy. I will add a transcript of this video somewhere down below since it may be hard to hear. I will also add videos linking to the full tier 30 dimensional trial runs I did on Korea. There are slight differences though, not having the mechanics start at 90 for example.